Hey everyone, welcome to Management Tip Unpacked, our new monthly LinkedIn Live series where we'll help you make sense of your career, the workplace, the wider business landscape. I'm Nicole Smith, the Editorial Audience Director at HBR, and joining me today, I'm going to have Octavia Gorodima. She's a career coach and author of the book Prep, Push, Pivot. I actually just read it, so we're going to dive a little bit into the book at the end. But today we'll be talking about how to show up as a great mentor and sponsor for your team. I'll be starting off with a few questions for Octavia, but I actually want to hear from you as well. So please just share any questions you have in the chat and tell us where you're from about mentorship and sponsorship in the comments. Hey, Octavia.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you
Hey.
so much for having me.
Oh, well, you know what? You are a vet at HBR, so I find it to be a great pleasure to interview you today about a topic you really care about, since we chatted a bit about mentorship and sponsorship. And so the first question I want to ask you is, what's the difference?
So, a mentor is someone who can support, advise, and guide you during your career. A mentor might be someone who works with you at your organization, or they may not. It might be someone who is within your industry or within your broader professional networks, but they have expertise or areas of insight that are super helpful or valuable with regards to a next step that you want to make.
Mhm.
A sponsor is someone who is an advocate for your career advancement. They act on your behalf to accelerate opportunities for you to take that next step. And as a result, sponsors usually work with you at your organization and are more senior leaders at your organization.
Can a sponsor be outside of your organization?
They can be if they have influence in terms of the next step that you want to make and connections to do so. But it's more common for a sponsor to work with you when you're looking to make that next step. Now, a mentor and a sponsor can sometimes be the same thing because sometimes a sponsorship relationship and dynamic began from mentoring, or sometimes someone just might be a mentor. And so a mentor can come in several forms. It might be that you find that person from outside your organization or from initiatives that you're connected with or professional organizations. And mentorship is so valuable because it can provide a sounding board
Mhm.
for when you are wanting to talk through opportunities or challenges or perspectives. And a mentor can share their perspective on what you're looking to do next based on the path that they have walked themselves.
Well, here's the thing. So, a lot of the people in the audience are managers, right? So this is
Yes.
management tip unpacked. Why should a manager concern themselves, right? Why should they learn how to be a sponsor, a mentor? Why should they take
So,
that responsibility?
so I'm a career coach and I coach thousands of professionals every year. I work with companies large and small to provide workshops and group coaching and one-on-one coaching. And there's a consistent theme that I see. The individuals who are motivated and empowered and engaged all have mentors or sponsors or both who have contributed to their advancement. And then on the flip side, the individuals that I work with that are struggling and are not focused and are trying to figure out if they should remain at their organization or what they should do next. More often than not, they don't have a mentor and they don't have a sponsor. So, being a leader, it's so important to recognize what an impact you have. And you may not even be in a formalized mentoring program, but you have to recognize that other people look to you. They look at how you navigate your career. They look at how you show up to meetings. They look to how you show up in the workplace. And you have to realize that if your actions inspire others to learn more, or do more, or become more, or dream bigger, you're a leader. And so you have an opportunity to make an investment in the career development and advancement of others.
Mhm. Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why I actually like management is that I get to help other people shape their career or grow or, I feel like that's an advantage of management. But what if I figure out I'm this really great mentor? I feel good about mentoring people. I'm not quite sure if I can be a sponsor. Can you be a good mentor and not suited to be a sponsor?
So that's a really great question, Nikki, because sponsorship, there's a lot of components that go into it.
Mhm.
First of all, as someone who is looking for that level of support, they have to be really clear about what they're looking to do next and why they're looking to do that next and what they may need to help get there. And sponsors also have to look and see, where can I add value? How might I be able to support? And dependent on what the individual needs, there may be opportunities. It may be that it lends itself better to a mentoring relationship than actually being able to take the next steps to be a sponsor. So there's a lot that goes into it, but there are also so many ways that you can be a sponsor of others. Often we think about, oh, we need that person to help us get our next promotion or that next opportunity. But as a sponsor, you can shine a light just in terms of recognizing the accomplishments of someone else, talking about someone else's work,
Mhm.
making recommendations in terms of a connection that could be a really powerful catalyst
Mhm.
for that person. So a sponsor acts. A sponsor takes actions that will help your career advancement, and that might come in a variety of different forms.
Mhm. Mhm. So it can look different, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Claudia from France, she asked us, what are your tips on being a mentor from a distance? So let's talk a little bit about that. How
Yes.
can you be a good mentor virtually, or
And
is that really an in-person engagement?
so, in a nutshell, absolutely. You can be a great mentor if you are from a distance, if you are remote. And so much has shifted for so many of us over recent years, but a consistent theme is that visibility matters. And so if you have already made the commitment to invest your time in supporting someone else, that is powerful. If you are from a distance, I think as a mentor, and it's really important to perhaps give some consideration to the parameters for how you can work with your mentee, how you'll communicate, and talk about that and perhaps lay that out in terms of an outline at the outset. But be prepared to be flexible, and also recognize your capacity too, and communicate when you perhaps might be busy or when you might not be able to connect, and also be proactive about checking in between too. But I don't think being remote is an obstacle. I actually think it can be a real advantage, because when you have individuals who have maybe taken on new responsibilities or started at your organization or are early in their career, and if they are working remotely, that visibility might not be where they would like it to be. They might not have the opportunity to forge new connections or to observe how things take place in your place of work. So those connections that you can make as a mentor will be so valuable. They really will.
Mhm. Well, I want to remind everyone you can ask Octavia a question. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can throughout the conversation. Just drop it in the chat. Let us know your name, where you're from, and your question. But speaking of, so basically, I've taken on a manager role, right? And I want to know, is it an expectation that I be my employee's mentor or sponsor? Is that a given? Is that a foregone conclusion?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Nikki. And you need to look at, well, first of all, does your organization have programs or opportunities or employee resource groups or mechanisms that pair individuals with mentors? And if so, and if you want to raise your hand for those, that's fantastic. But when you're looking in terms of your day-to-day and dependent on your capacity and dependent on the number of people that you lead, you may not be able to mentor everyone who asks you or everyone that you want to. But here's the thing. Mentoring can take place in so many different forms. Sometimes we think of it as perhaps an ongoing, sustained relationship, and it's fantastic if that happens, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Even one-off conversations can be so valuable. And here's the thing, for so many professionals, the only time they get asked about their career development and their goals is maybe once a year in their performance reviews. And that's a real missed opportunity. So if you have perhaps, I don't know, team meetings or one-on-one meetings with your team, maybe once a quarter, you make time to ask open-ended questions and talk about goals and talk about what that individual is working towards and give space to share perspectives and have a mentor-led conversation, even if you perhaps may not be in a formal mentoring relationship. I think you can still find lots of ways to do that. So many organizations have fireside chat opportunities, professional associations, they do the same thing. You can be providing guidance to more than one person when you share how you've done what you do and what you've learned from the process. So don't forget that too.
Do you see performance reviews? Because you mentioned performance reviews. Do you see
Yes.
that as a tool for mentoring?
It can be. Of course, it's a really important opportunity to talk about next steps and progress. But I think it's a missed opportunity if that's the only time when you are having those conversations with the people that report into you or work alongside you. It's a real missed opportunity. I think it's really important to be intentional about career development in between and in the build up to performance reviews. Now, bandwidth is key. It's not always possible to, as I said, mentor everyone that works alongside you, but having mentor-focused conversations can happen at regular intervals. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Karen from South Carolina in the United States says, how do we communicate value of volunteer experience? So think board positions, you mentoring, that could help with the career transition when it usually isn't ranked in like a traditional job application.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And often there is so much that we might be doing in our broader lives that impact our work in terms of and how we show up as leaders. And I think it's important, maybe your manager or boss doesn't know that you sit on a board. And if they do, they might not be aware of what you are delivering in that role. And so communicate, share not just what you're doing, but what your insights are from that work. And often that might provide opportunities for you to not just mentor, but perhaps add value to your organization based from what you're learning. Because I think what we sometimes forget as well, when we're thinking about being a mentor, it's what we're giving and what we're providing. But there's so much that we as leaders also can learn and benefit from. We broaden our networks. We learn new perspectives. We foster new relationships. All of those things are incredibly valuable. And so it's important for your peers and for your managers to know as well what you are immersed in. So definitely communicate and share your insights from those roles.
Okay, well, one more, and then I'll ask you some thoughts that I was having. But Bruno from Massachusetts asked, would it be accurate to say that a sponsor is usually a mentor? Do they always have to go hand in hand?
They can be both, but not always. It might be. I'll give an example. You know, I started my career in the United Kingdom. I now live and work here in the United States. The reason I'm here in the United States is because someone acted as a sponsor for me and recommended me for a transfer for a role at my company at the time here in the United States. That person wasn't a mentor to me, but they were proactive in my advancement. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be that you are a mentor to be an advocate for someone else.
Okay.
They can be separate.
Okay. Fair enough. So, what skills or characteristics should I have if I want to be an effective sponsor? Can I put it, pin it down to a specific skill set or skills or characteristic?
Um, Ask questions, be a great listener, um, present ideas and opportunities. A sponsor stretches you. They stretch what you might think could be possible. They open doors. They forge connections. They even can plant seeds of ideas for you to explore further. And I think if you are a leader who is invested in the advancement of others, also, in addition to providing accountability, don't make assumptions either. Just because someone wants to perhaps do the same thing that you have done, or it doesn't mean that their experience or their journey to that will be the same as yours. Often we are drawn to individuals that there's something about them that we can see. They want to watch. That's fantastic. But be really inclusive about the connections that you make and who you are investing in, and don't make assumptions.
Yeah, that's probably just good advice in general.
Yes.
So, so let me ask you this: what questions should I be asking my mentee if I want to be a good mentor?
Oh, I really think it's important for mentees to be clear about their goals and prioritizing their goals. So, open ended questions about what excites you about your role? What are you looking to do more of? Where can I potentially add value to that? And listen to the responses. And remember, as a mentor, it's not necessarily your responsibility to have all of the answers that your mentee might be looking for.
Mhm.
There might be some things you're not able to assist with or provide a perspective on, and that's okay. But what I think is really important also to remember is that when you're a mentor, it's one of the few spaces that your mentee will have to talk about things that might be challenging or difficult, and have space and to fail and to explore what it might look like if things don't work or aren't working the way that they want to. And one of the most powerful things that you can also do as a mentor is share perhaps where things hadn't worked for you and what you learned from that, and how you navigated that, and how you moved forward. Because when we're at work, we don't want to make mistakes, right? We're there to solve problems, we're there to add value. We don't want to make mistakes. And often we don't feel we can necessarily talk to our peers or our managers about things that aren't working the way that we want them to. And so having a mentor can be a safe space to explore that and to discuss that. And I firmly believe that's where you learn the most.
Well, how much do you discuss? Because Eduardo from the Philippines asked, how
Yeah.
much do you decide, or how much guidance should you give a mentee, right? How much room should you give them to make their own decisions and, like you said, make their own mistakes? How much guidance should I be giving a mentee?
Yes, we can be um, it can be a very difficult one, especially when we're forging relationships and we want the person we're working with to succeed. But here's the thing: you have to give your mentee space to absorb and to act. And what happens next is not in your control. But you have done your role as a mentor to provide support and advice and guidance. The rest is up to your mentee, and only share what you feel comfortable sharing. You are in the best position to judge in terms of what your mentee might need, and then what they need to go and explore and do next.
Mhm. Okay. So, how do you choose your mentee?
Sometimes organizations are very intentional about providing opportunities to pair individuals with mentees. Sometimes you might be asked out of the blue by somebody if you can provide support. So, my advice is always trust your gut. And also know that a mentoring relationship doesn't have to last forever. And if you start working with someone as in a mentor and mentee relationship and it's not quite working for whatever reason, that's okay.
Mhm.
That's okay. But you can recognize that and provide some feedback and some counsel, and that person can perhaps find someone who might be better aligned in terms of what they need, and you in turn might be able to work with someone who you can best support too. I think that's absolutely fine. You
Well,
know, I've worked at this in this space in so many components. I have been mentored. I still am mentored. I have mentored others. I've served on the steering committee to put together mentoring programs. And I think it's really important to recognize that we want to try and make sure that there's a great fit, but sometimes it takes time to figure out if there is a fit. And it's okay if there isn't.
mhm, mhm. Well, it sounds like, quite frankly, it just sounds like a big job. What if I feel overwhelmed? What if I feel overwhelmed about this whole, now I became a manager and a mentor, and maybe I'm a sponsor. How do I deal with the weight of it all?
It can sometimes, when you're looking at it from the outside, you might think, am I capable of doing all of this? And I think it's important to recognize your bandwidth, and you don't want to burn out and take on responsibilities or perhaps start things that you can't fully invest in. So recognize that there might not be a good time for you to jump into something new if you are completely at capacity. But here's the thing, people look to us sometimes, whether we recognize it or not. I mean, think about it, Nikki. There might be people in your professional circle, people that you admire, who they don't realize the impact that they have just on you in terms of you looking to them as role models. So just know that there can be different degrees in terms of how you can support someone, whether it's a, a one-time 30-minute conversation can be so powerful. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that you are meeting with someone twice a month, once a month for a year. You can decide how you can show up, how you can support other people. And if it's a one-time conversation, you commit to maybe having a few of those, a quarter or a few of those a year, that's still making a difference.
Mhm,
That
mhm.
is still making a difference. So don't underestimate what you might be able to contribute to with the capacity that you have.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about, it feels like a lot of our conversation has surrounded the thought of one-on-one engagement, but
Yes.
Harshita from San Francisco asked, what's your opinion on having multiple mentees at once? Is that feasible?
It of course it depends on your capacity and how you are doing it. It is feasible, but there might be opportunities for you, like I said, in professional associations or events to share and to talk to multiple people at once and answer questions at the end. That is also really valuable. And one-on-one relationships, if you're looking to cultivate those, it might be that you check in, you have a relationship where you check in with each other twice a year, 3 times a year. You can decide it might be at pivotal moments for that person. It might not necessarily be that it's a constant presence. Or on the flip side, you might be in a relationship where it's a program and there's a number of meetings and there's a start and an end. You decide where you can best add value and try something. See how it feels. If
Mhm.
it doesn't work for you, make some adjustments and do it a little differently the next time. You ultimately get to decide. And as you become more and more senior in your career, there's probably going to be more and more opportunities and questions for you to mentor and support others. And there are ripple effects of that, because you have to remember the people that you are investing in are going to be mentors of others. So there's a cumulative impact. So don't underestimate that. That one person that you support is going to go on and support other people too. So you are continually adding value by making that one investment at the
Well, it
beginning.
sounds like it's can be a learning process, right? So
Yes.
I try again, but where can I learn to be a mentor? Is there like a playbook somewhere?
Now, some organizations actually do invest in providing training and like parameters and how to have mentoring conversations. But I know that often doesn't happen. So, what I encourage anyone to do is think back on your own career. Think about moments where you were supported. Think about moments where somebody helped you. What was it about that interaction? What did they do? How did they approach it? How did that help me? Observe others around you. Ask questions of people in your network who maybe have mentored others or have been sponsors of others. Talk to your own manager and ask how they approach it. And there's a lot of resources and conversations that can really help you if you're trying to figure out how to navigate those next steps.
Mhm. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but I do want to ask a particular question from Jason from Ontario. This is a great question. How might we deal with a poor mentor-mentee partnership? How do you know when to end things?
Be honest. Be honest. If you know it's not working out, you can just say, I know how important this goal or your next steps are, and I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to work with someone who can best support you with that next step. I think it's really important because it might not work, and that's okay. It's not necessarily a reflection on you as a mentor. It just means that the person that you perhaps were wanting to work with needs support from somebody else who might be better aligned with their needs, and that's absolutely fine. Do not stay in a relationship that isn't going to work, because that doesn't benefit you and that doesn't benefit your mentee.
Yeah. Personally and professionally, I think you could take that advice.
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about this before we came on live about mentoring, sponsorship, and you also mentioned coach. And there's been a few people who have talked about that in the chat about what's the difference between mentoring and coaching. Is it the same? Is it different? Can you explain that to us?
Yes. So I believe, Nikki, we all need mentors. And I said that plural on purpose. I believe we need more than one mentor. We need mentors, we need sponsors, and we need coaching. They are all distinct, but they are all impactful. So a mentor, as we discussed, supports, guides, and advises you. A sponsor is proactive, will act on your behalf, will make recommendations for you, will provide stretch opportunities, will talk about your work, will make introductions. A coach meets you exactly where you are and is invested in your next steps and works side by side with you to achieve your next steps. And a coach might not be someone who is in the same role as you or has the same exact area of expertise, but they have a skill set that provides a platform and a foundation for you to build from. And so they work alongside each other. Often you might have a really great mentor who also can coach you through certain situations too. But often those relationships are a little bit distinct from one another. But I think it's really important, if possible, to have all three. But I also recognize how hard it is in the first place to have a mentor, and how hard it is in the first place to have a sponsor that's invested in you. So recognize that all three might not happen at the same time, but they can be such powerful catalysts for your career. And if you are a leader and you're trying to figure out about where the lines blur in terms of mentoring and coaching and sponsorship, recognize that you have the ability to play to your strengths. Think about what your strengths are and where you can add value. And don't worry too much about trying to make sure that you fit into every single role. That might not be possible. Play to your strengths.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, what if a manager wants to be a sponsor but has imposter syndrome? How do I overcome that feeling?
So often leaders we are so consumed in terms of our roles and our responsibilities and what we're looking to do next and how we're supporting our teams, that we don't often recognize some of the smallest interactions can make a huge impact to somebody else. And so recognize that you are in a position where people look to you, and there's a reason for that. And even if there are things you are still working towards yourself and problems that you are still solving, there are still so many spaces for you to add value. And in my book, I talk about paying it forward and how we can do that regardless of how we feel about where we are in our careers. It's still possible for us to pay it forward for others in multiple ways.
Well, you mentioned your book. I actually wanted to talk about that, Prep, Push, Pivot. And you also sent me a copy, so I appreciate that. But just give us a little sense of what we'll find in the book, and if there's anything about sponsorship, about mentorship in the book.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I'm a career coach, but I recognize that most people do not have the opportunity to work one-on-one with a career coach. If you're fortunate enough to work for a company that provides coaching or invests in professional development, that is fantastic, and definitely leverage that resource for coaching. But not all organizations have the ability to do that. And I recognize that coaching is expensive. And at the same time, I realized how much can be gained from having someone that is invested in your career. And I wanted to write a book that would support underrepresented women at key moments in their career if they do not have the opportunity to work one-on-one with a coach. I didn't have the opportunity to work with a coach until I was mid-career. It would have been a game changer if I could have done it earlier. And so I wrote my book, Prep, Push, Pivot, for all of the moments that we face at different points, whether that's figuring out what our next step should be and what our careers roadmap should be, what we want our careers to feel like, how to negotiate our salary, how to bounce back from that negotiation if you hear no, how to position yourself for promotion. And I talk about the importance of having mentors and sponsors and advocates with regards to your promotion path, how to navigate a career break or returning to work, balancing your career as a caregiver, how to change careers if you're looking to make that pivot, but also how to be pivotal to the career advancement of others.
It sounds great. And this entire conversation, I loved it. I feel like we got a lot of bases covered. I feel like we could go on for another half hour. However, our time has come to an end. Octavia, I want to thank you so much for coming to HBR and just really just advising us and really being our sponsor and our mentor and teaching us. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Nikki.
Well, everyone, that wraps it up. I want you to keep an eye on your inbox every Tuesday for our management tip of the week LinkedIn newsletter. We'll announce our next LinkedIn Live right here. And then also that will be in the coming weeks. And if you haven't subscribed yet, look for a link in the comments of this video. That'll be your opportunity to subscribe and get notes and all the good things. And I want to thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.